It was May 2005. For most of Natalee Holloway's classmates, this was the trip of a lifetime. They had just graduated from Mountain Brook High School in Alabama. Young, ambitious, full of laughter and plans for the future. Aruba, with its turquoise waters, white sand beaches, and vibrant nightlife, was supposed to be the perfect send-off before college. Natalee was no different. Bright, ambitious, and endlessly kind, she had her whole life ahead of her. She was bound for the University of Alabama, planning to study pre-med. Friends remembered her as the type of person who would offer help before you even asked. She was that dependable, that loved. But on that final night in Aruba, amid the music and neon glow of a bustling Caribbean nightclub, Natalee Holloway's story would take a chilling turn. Carlos and Charlie's was alive with energy, a popular spot for both locals and tourists. It throbbed with music and laughter. Inside, groups of graduates danced, drinks in hand, letting loose before returning home. Natalee, wearing her signature smile, was seen mingling with friends, celebrating their last night on the island. Photos snapped that evening show her glowing, alive, unaware what the night still had in store. But amidst the joy, there was a shadow. Watching her, circling, was an unfamiliar figure. His name, Joran Sloot. Joran wasn't part of the school trip. He wasn't even a tourist. He was an 18-year-old Dutch student who lived in Aruba with his family. Known for being charming but deceptive, Joran had a reputation for luring young women. That night, Natalee was seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's in his company, along with two brothers, Deepak and Satish Kalpo. Witnesses recalled seeing the group laughing, heading into the humid night, climbing into a car. It was the last time Natalee Holloway would ever be seen alive. Outside, Aruba's streets were quieter than the chaos inside the club. The air was heavy, humid, with only the buzz of insects and distant ocean waves. For her friends, the night blurred into music and laughter. They assumed Natalee had gone back to the hotel. Nobody thought twice. After all, this was a tropical paradise, not a place where evil could be waiting just around the corner. But by morning, the illusion would shatter. What makes this moment so haunting is the ordinariness of it. A girl enjoying her last night with friends. A stranger offering a ride. It could have been anyone. Natalee's disappearance became a chilling reminder. The moments we take for granted, the decisions we think are harmless, can sometimes open the door to darkness we never see coming. And for the Holloway family, that night will become the dividing line between before and after. As the car pulled away into the Aruba night, headlights cutting across empty roads, no one could have imagined the nightmare about to unfold. For Natalee's classmates, the next morning meant packing their bag for home. For her parents, it meant waiting for her return at the airport. But for Natalee herself, it meant silence. A silence that has echoed for 2 decades. The stage was set. Aruba, a paradise, had just become the scene of one of the world's most enduring mysteries. And the question that would haunt millions: what happened to Natalee Holloway? The sun rose over Aruba on May 30th, 2005, casting golden light across the beaches. Tourists were already heading to breakfast, locals preparing for another warm day. To most, it was just another morning in paradise. But for one group of American teenagers, paradise was about to unravel. At the Holiday Inn where Natalee's classmates stayed, the lobby buzzed with chatter and luggage wheels clattering against the floor. It was departure day. The students were flying back to Birmingham, Alabama. Parents were waiting. The future was calling. Except something was wrong. As friends gathered, a name was missing. A seat remained empty. Natalee Holloway wasn't there. At first, there was no panic. Someone suggested she was still asleep. Another guessed she had gone for a morning walk on the beach. She was responsible, punctual, but maybe, just maybe, she lost track of time. But minutes turned into an hour, and Natalee never arrived. By the time the plane prepared for boarding, panic had replaced optimism. Friends scoured the hotel. Calls to her room went unanswered. Housekeeping confirmed the bed hadn't been slept in. And then, the word that froze everyone in place. She never came back last night. The truth landed with the weight of a storm. Natalee Holloway wasn't late. She was gone. Back in Alabama, Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway, was preparing to welcome her daughter home. But instead of seeing Natalee step off the plane, Beth's phone rang with the news every parent dreads. Natalee's missing. Beth's world collapsed in that instant. She would later describe it as feeling like the air had been ripped from her lungs. Her daughter, her only daughter, had vanished on a small island thousands of miles away. Within hours, Beth and her husband, Judd Twitty, were on a plane to Aruba. They weren't waiting for answers to come to them. They were going to find Natalee themselves. On the island, the search began with urgency. Police officers were alerted, hotel staff questioned, and classmates interviewed. Everyone knew the same fact. Natalee had been seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's with Joran Sloot and the Calpo brothers. That was the last trace. Aruba, a quiet tourist paradise, wasn't prepared for a storm like this. Suddenly, beaches once known for romance and sunsets were filled with search parties. Volunteers combed through brush and dunes. Divers scanned coral reefs. Helicopters circled overhead. But there was no sign of Natalee. Tourists who had once sipped cocktails by the shore now whispered in fear. Locals who rarely locked their doors began looking over their shoulders. Aruba had lost its innocence. When Beth Holloway arrived, she didn't waste a second. Still in travel clothes, she went straight to the police and demanded action. "I know who has my daughter," she told them. "His name is Joran Sloot." Beth had already learned what most parents would take weeks to discover. Natalee had left with Joran, and Beth was certain he was the key. But what she didn't know, what no one knew, was just how manipulative, how slippery, and how cruel Joran would prove to be. As night fell over Aruba again, searchlights cut across the sand, casting long shadows. Beth Holloway stood by the ocean, staring out into the dark waves, refusing to believe her daughter was gone. The island was buzzing with speculation. Witnesses stepped forward with conflicting stories. Joran and the Calpo brothers told lies that shifted with every question. And the world was about to watch as a missing persons case transformed into one of the most infamous disappearances of the 21st century. Natalee Holloway was missing, but the bigger question loomed like a dark cloud. Would she ever be found? From the very first hours of Natalee Holloway's disappearance, one name kept surfacing. A name whispered by classmates, repeated by bartenders, and written down in police reports. Joran Sloot. At just 18 years old, Joran looked like someone Natalee's friends might have trusted. Tall, well-spoken, with a Dutch accent and an easy smile. He appeared confident in ways most teenagers didn't. But behind the charm, there was something else. Locals described him as a compulsive gambler, a manipulator, and someone with a dangerous temper. His reputation for preying on young women was well known, but rarely spoken aloud. Natalee's classmates remembered seeing her leave Carlos and Charlie's with Joran. For many, it seemed harmless. He wasn't a random stranger, at least not on the surface. He lived on the island. He knew his way around. But it was that familiarity, that ease, that made him all the more dangerous. Joran wasn't alone that night. Alongside him were Deepak and Satish Kalpoe, brothers of Surinamese descent who often hung out with him. They were seen driving a small car, the same car Natalee climbed into after leaving the nightclub. At first, the Kalpoe brothers denied everything. Then they admitted they were there. Then they changed their story again. Each time they spoke, their words tangled further into contradiction. And yet, the deeper investigators pressed, the more obvious it became. Joran was leading the narrative. When questioned by police, Joran's first account was chilling in its simplicity. He claimed he and the brothers had dropped Natalee off at her hotel around 2 a.m. He said she stumbled out of the car, drunk, and walked unsteadily toward the entrance. But there was one problem: security cameras. The Holiday and surveillance footage showed no sign of Natalee returning. Not that night. Not ever. It was the first crack in Joran's carefully constructed facade. Over the following days, Joran spun lie after lie, each more outrageous than the last. In one version, he said Natalee wanted to stay at the beach with him and the brothers, so they left her there. In another, he said she collapsed and refused to get back up, so he walked away. At one point, he even suggested she wanted to be left alone, as if she had chosen to vanish. Each story contradicted the last. Each one chipped away at the possibility of innocence. Investigators quickly realized something. Joran wasn't just lying. He was enjoying it. Beth Holloway wasted no time. She marched directly to the Vander Sloot home, demanding answers from Joran and his family. Eyewitnesses described her fury. A mother standing in front of the boy who had last been seen with her daughter. But Joran's calmness was unsettling. He denied wrongdoing, offered sympathy, and promised he didn't know where Natalee was. To Beth, it was infuriating. She knew he was lying, but she couldn't prove it. Not yet. Aruban authorities were under pressure like never before. International media had descended upon the island. CNN, Fox News, and every major outlet demanded updates. But the police struggled. Delays, confusion, and procedural mistakes plagued the investigation. Despite mounting evidence, Joran wasn't immediately arrested. Instead, he and the Kalpoe brothers walked free, their freedom a slap in the face to Natalee's grieving family. The frustration grew. The Holloways felt the system was protecting Joran. After all, his father, Paulus Vander Sloot, was a high-ranking legal official in Aruba. Connections ran deep. While cameras caught glimpses of Joran walking casually in public, Beth Holloway was haunted by one thought. If this boy could lie so easily about the last moments with her daughter, what else was he capable of? The world was asking the same question. Who was Joran Vander Sloot? And what had he really done with Natalee Holloway? By the end of the first week, the island's paradise had become a crime scene without a body. Natalee was gone. Joran was lying. The Kalpoes were covering for him. And yet, without a confession, without a trace of evidence, investigators couldn't prove what had happened. The world had found its first suspect. But this was only the beginning. Because Joran Vander Sloot wasn't just lying about Natalee. He was preparing to manipulate the entire world. Aruba had always been a postcard image of paradise. Sunlit beaches, crystal clear waters, smiling locals. But within days of Natalee Holloway's disappearance, that postcard began to tear apart. It started small, classmates retracing steps, hotel staff checking rooms. But when nothing surfaced, the island itself became the focus. Within 72 hours, Aruba had transformed into one of the largest coordinated search efforts the Caribbean had ever seen. Volunteers fanned out across beaches and dirt roads. Helicopters circled the island, their searchlights scanning over palm trees and abandoned buildings. Divers plunged into the turquoise waters, combing reefs and shipwrecks. Dogs sniffed through cane fields, following trails that vanished as quickly as they appeared. From the skies to the sea, Natalee's name echoed across every corner of the island. Word of the missing American teenager spread like wildfire. Within days, the story was everywhere. Photos of Natalee, smiling hopeful, frozen in youth, flashed across millions of screens. For Aruba, the sudden attention was overwhelming. Reporters clog hotel lobbies. Cameras trail police cars. Microphones chase officials. The Paradise Island was no longer selling tourism. It was the backdrop of a nightmare. At the center of it all was Beth Holloway. Her determination was unrelenting. She barely slept, barely ate. Each day, she joined search parties, walked beaches, and knocked on doors. Witnesses described her as a woman who refused to break, even as exhaustion painted her face. She wasn't just searching for her daughter. She was demanding accountability. Beth wasn't shy about calling out the Aruban authorities. In press conferences, she declared, "Joran van der Sloot knows what happened to my daughter." Her voice carried across the world. But the Aruban police were struggling. Leads slipped away. Witness statements contradicted each other. Evidence, if it existed, was invisible. The island's small police force was not built for a case of this magnitude. International pressure grew daily. American officials leaned on Aruban investigators. The FBI even offered support, sending specialists to assist. But still no body, no clothing, no phone, no purse, nothing. It was as though Natalee had vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, suspicion around Joran and the Calpo brothers deepened. Their story shifted so often that investigators began calling them a carousel of lies. The hotel drop-off story, the beach story, the she wanted to be left alone story. Each version twisted, reshaped, retracted. But despite inconsistencies, investigators lacked one critical piece: proof. Without it, Joran and the brothers walked free. And each day of freedom felt like salt in Beth Holloway's wounds. For tourists, the island lost its glow. Where there had once been music and cocktails, there were search parties and suspicion. Where there had been laughter, there was fear. Local businesses worried. Hotels received cancellations. Families debated whether Aruba was safe. And yet, behind the tourism losses, the deeper wound was moral. A young woman had vanished on their island, and the world was watching how they responded. For Natalee's classmates, the trip that was supposed to be a celebration became a trauma. Many returned home to Alabama, haunted by guilt, nightmares, and questions that had no answers. Why hadn't they stopped her from leaving with strangers? Why didn't they notice sooner? Could they have prevented it? The human cost of that night rippled far beyond the beaches of Aruba. By the end of that first week, Aruba was no longer a paradise. It was a stage, a spotlight, a place where hope and despair collided daily. Natalee Holloway was still missing. Joran van der Sloot was still lying. Beth Holloway was still searching. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows of paradise, the truth about what happened to Natalee lay buried. But if Joran thought he could outsmart the world, he was about to face pressure unlike anything he had ever known. The truth is heavy, and when someone fears it, they try to bury it beneath lies. For Joran van der Sloot, lying wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was his weapon, his shield, his game. And in the weeks following Natalee Holloway's disappearance, Joran wielded it with chilling precision. Joran's initial story was simple. He and the Calpo brothers had dropped Natalee at her hotel. She was drunk, he claimed, and stumbled out of the car around 2 a.m. He watched her walk toward the entrance before leaving, but the Holiday Inn's cameras told a different story. There was no footage of Natalee returning. Security guards confirmed they hadn't seen her. The lie shattered instantly. But Joran didn't panic. Instead, he adjusted. Confronted with evidence, Joran shifted his tale. This time, he claimed Natalee had asked to go to the beach with him. They sat in the sand, he said, and she eventually collapsed, intoxicated, refusing to get up. In this version, he left her there, alone, unconscious, by the waves. But the police weren't convinced. Aruba's beaches have been scoured by volunteers, dogs, and divers. No trace of Natalee appeared. Again, Joran's story collapsed. Again, he pivoted. Soon after, Joran spun another narrative. Natalee, he said, didn't want to go back to her hotel. She wanted freedom. She asked to be left alone, to disappear into the night on her own terms. It was a story designed to absolve him of responsibility, painting Natalee as reckless, as though she had chosen her own fate. For Beth Holloway, that version was salt in the wound. Her daughter was not reckless. Her daughter would not vanish willingly. It was a cruel twist of the knife, placing blame on the victim instead of the predator. The Calpo brothers only deepened the chaos. At first, they backed Joran's claims. Then they contradicted him. Then they contradicted themselves. In one interview, Deepak admitted he had lied to protect Joran. In another, Satish insisted he had no idea what had really happened. Each version fractured trust. Each one tangled investigators further in a web of deceit. And yet, despite the constant contradictions, the three young men still walked free. Beth Holloway couldn't bear it. She sat in interrogation rooms, watched these boys twist words, and felt rage boil inside her. They're lying, she told anyone who would listen. They know what happened to Natalee, and they're laughing at us. Her fury echoed worldwide. Media outlets captured every moment of her grief and anger. Mothers across America saw themselves in Beth, fighting not just for a missing daughter, but for truth itself. As Joran's lies multiplied, so did public suspicion. News anchors called him the boy who couldn't tell the truth. Psychologists described his behavior as narcissistic and sociopathic. His smirk in interviews, his calmness in the face of accusations, his almost playful manipulation of timelines. To the world, Joran wasn't just a suspect. He was a villain, and in the theater of public opinion, he had already been convicted. Behind the scenes, Aruban police tried to play his game. They let Joran talk. They let him spin new lies. And each time, they recorded it, hoping his contradictions would betray him. But without hard evidence, their hands were tied. Aruba's justice system required more than suspicion and inconsistent stories. The Holloways wanted arrests. They wanted justice. But Joran knew something they didn't. As long as there was no body, no proof, he could keep playing. By the end of the first month, Joran van der Sloot had told so many lies that even he seemed to lose track. The hotel story, the beach story, the she wanted to be left alone story. A carousel of contradictions, spinning endlessly, leaving investigators dizzy and the Holloway family devastated. But the question lingered like smoke over the island. If Joran was lying about everything, what was the truth? And worse, what had he done with Natalee Holloway? For most parents, grief is private. It is endured in silence, hidden behind closed doors. But for Beth Holloway, grief became a war cry. Her daughter was missing, and she refused to let Natalee become just another statistic, another unsolved tragedy. If Aruba couldn't or wouldn't deliver justice, then Beth would drag the truth into the light herself. Everywhere Beth went, cameras followed. Microphones were shoved in her face. Reporters repeated the same questions. What do you think happened to your daughter? What do you want to say to Joran van der Sloot? Do you believe Natalee is alive? Each time, Beth's answers cut straight through the noise. Her voice cracked with emotion, but her words never wavered. My daughter did not disappear. Someone took her, and I will not stop until the world knows who. Her fury became the fuel of the story. Her tears became headlines, and her strength inspired millions. Beth quickly learned that the Aruban justice system wasn't built for speed or transparency. Delays stacked up. Suspects were released. Evidence wasn't shared. She refused to stay silent. She marched into police stations, confronted officials, and demanded updates. When they stalled, she turned to the cameras outside. The police know who has my daughter, she declared. They just won't act. Her accusations rattled the island. Officials bristled. Tourism leaders panicked. But Beth didn't care. She wasn't there for diplomacy. She was there for Natalee. Back home in the United States, Beth became a symbol of relentless motherhood. Prayer vigils were held across Alabama. Churches lit candles. Students wore ribbons. TV networks gave her a platform. Night after night, she appeared on national broadcasts, her southern voice trembling yet firm. Each appearance pushed the story further. Each headline kept Natalee's name alive. In living rooms across America, mothers saw themselves in Beth, desperate, broken, yet unwilling to give up. Her fight became their fight. Behind the cameras, Beth was still human. Exhaustion gnawed at her. Nights were spent staring at the ceiling of a hotel room in Aruba, replaying her daughter's last known moments. She carried Natalee's photograph everywhere, showing it to strangers, holding it up in interviews, as though sheer willpower could bring her daughter back. But beneath the strength was an unspoken fear. What if Natalee was already gone? Beth couldn't voice it. Not yet. Hope was the only thing keeping her standing. Beth didn't just stop at officials. She went after Joran himself. On more than one occasion, she showed up at the van der Sloot home. Imagine the scene. A grieving mother standing at the doorstep of her daughter's suspected killer. Cameras capturing the fury in her eyes. Where is Natalee? She demanded. Joran gave the same calm denials. No flinch. No remorse. Just another smirk. For Beth, the lack of empathy was almost as painful as the disappearance itself. This wasn't just a liar. This was a predator, enjoying the game. By the second month, Beth's crusade had changed the landscape. American politicians began weighing in. Aruba faced international pressure. Tourism, the lifeblood of the island, began to falter as families canceled trips. Beth's voice was no longer just a mother's cry. It was a political force. And yet, despite all the noise, Natalee remained missing. The lies kept multiplying. The trail grew colder. Beth Holloway's crusade ensured that the world would never forget her daughter's name. Natalee wasn't just another missing person. She was a symbol of the fight for truth in the face of corruption and deceit. But with every headline, every tearful interview, and every confrontation, the truth seemed to slip further away. Beth had turned the case into an international cause. But behind the cameras, in the shadows of Aruba, Joran van der Sloot was preparing his next move. A move that would plunge the case into even darker territory. When Natalee Holloway vanished, Aruba's beaches should have been filled with the sound of tourists, laughter, steel drums, and waves lapping against the shore. Instead, they were overrun by the relentless clicking of cameras and the buzz of satellite vans. This wasn't just a local investigation anymore. Natalee's disappearance had become an international obsession. Within days, the case dominated American cable news. CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, every channel ran the story 24/7. News anchors spoke her name with solemn gravity. Analysts dissected Joran's every word. One commentator summed it up. This isn't just about a missing girl. It's about truth, power, and whether justice can survive lies. Aruba, a small island suddenly under the world's microscope, could no longer keep secrets in the shadows. Reporters descended like vultures. Hotels were booked solid. Beaches crowded not with tourists but with journalists and their cameras. Every day, crews filmed outside the van der Sloot home. Every night, they stalked the streets, searching for scraps of information. The Calpo brothers couldn't step outside without microphones being shoved in their faces. Joran's every smirk became front-page news. And Beth Holloway, weary, grieving, yet resolute, became the story's heart. Her voice echoed across living rooms, pleading for answers. The media storm should have intimidated Joran. It should have forced him into silence. But instead, it fed him. Joran granted interviews, smirking into cameras, retelling his lies with confidence. One day, it was the hotel drop-off. The next, the beach story. Then a new version entirely. Each time, the contradictions were obvious. But Joran didn't flinch. He enjoyed the attention. For many watching, it was proof of something darker. This wasn't just a boy caught in a mystery. This was a manipulator reveling in his stage. As the coverage intensified, so did public opinion. Some viewers sympathized with Beth, rallying behind her as a mother fighting an impossible battle. Others began to criticize her, accusing her of media manipulation or politicizing her daughter's tragedy. And still a smaller, sinister group defended Joran, painting him as a victim of media bias. The case wasn't just a search anymore. It had become a cultural war. For Aruba, the media frenzy was catastrophic. Tourism collapsed. Airlines reported canceled flights. Hotels sat empty. Travel forums filled with fear and anger. How could a young American girl disappear and no one be held accountable? Island officials felt cornered. They wanted the cameras gone. They wanted Beth's accusations silenced. But each attempt to calm the storm only fueled it more. Natalee's disappearance had exposed a wound that could not be hidden. With every day that passed without evidence, speculation filled the void. Talk shows spun theories. Was Natalee trafficked? Was she killed in a fit of rage? Was there a cover-up protecting wealthy families? Theories ran wild, and the lack of closure gave them oxygen. For Beth, the speculation was agony. Each theory was a knife twisting deeper, reminding her of how little she truly knew about her daughter's last hours. Through it all, Beth refused to leave the island. She gave interviews under the harsh Caribbean sun, clutching Natalee's photo. She walked beaches with search teams. She confronted police with cameras rolling behind her. If the authorities hoped her grief would fade, they were wrong. Beth's persistence guaranteed that every failure of the investigation played out live on global television. By the end of that summer, Natalee Holloway's disappearance wasn't just news. It was a spectacle, a grieving mother, a smug suspect, a divided public, an island suffocating under scrutiny. And in the center of it all, the one person who could answer the question, Joran Sloot, seemed to grow bolder by the day. But soon, the media's obsession would push the case into even stranger, darker territory. Because sometimes, the louder the world screams for truth, the further it slips into shadows. When the truth refuses to come willingly, sometimes you have to trap it. That became the philosophy of those hunting Joran Sloot. The lies were endless, the evidence elusive. But one thing was clear, Joran liked to talk. And talkative suspects could be their own undoing. By late 2007, the investigation had stalled. Joran was free, and Natalee's case was slipping from headlines. But one Dutch journalist, Peter R. de Vries, wasn't willing to let the trail go cold. He believed Joran knew exactly what had happened to Natalee. The challenge was getting him to admit it. So, de Vries devised a plan. Infiltrate Joran's world with someone he trusted, someone who could lure him into bragging about his darkest secret. The bait? An acquaintance named Patrick Vander E.M., a supposed friend with criminal connections. The goal? Get Joran to talk when he thought no one was listening. Patrick met Joran under the guise of a drinking buddy. They drove around in a car fitted with hidden cameras. They smoked, laughed, and exchanged stories about women. And then, casually, Joran opened up. On the tapes, he described Natalee collapsing on the beach, unconscious after a night of drinking. He claimed he couldn't wake her. So, he said, he panicked and called a friend who took care of it. He watched, he claimed, as Natalee's body was loaded onto a boat and dumped into the ocean. For millions who would later see the footage, it was chilling, not just because of what he said, but how he said it, casually, almost proudly, like bragging about a night out. When Peter R. de Vries aired the hidden camera sting on Dutch television in 2008, the world froze. The footage was raw, unfiltered, and damning. For Natalee's family, it was like watching her final moments through the eyes of her killer. The broadcast drew nearly 7 million viewers in the Netherlands alone and was replayed across America. For Beth Holloway, it was both a breakthrough and a torment. She finally heard Joran admit involvement, but without a body, the confession couldn't secure a conviction. The justice system wanted hard evidence. not just words caught in a trap. Joran, of course, backpedaled. He claimed he'd been lying during the hidden camera sting, that he had just made the story up to impress Patrick. It was a stunning display of arrogance, dismissing a taped confession as nothing more than entertainment. But to many watching, it proved exactly who he was. A pathological liar who enjoyed playing with the truth like a toy. Still, legally, his tactic worked. Without physical proof, authorities couldn't pin Natalee's fate on him. The sting had revealed his character, but not the body. The sting operation marked a turning point. From then on, the world no longer debated whether Joran was innocent. The question became, how could a man so openly toy with the truth escape justice? Journalists called him the boy who killed without proof. Psychologists labeled him a narcissist, a compulsive manipulator. But for Beth Holloway, it was simpler. She saw a murderer hiding behind technicalities, smirking while her daughter's body was lost forever, and she vowed she wouldn't stop until that smirk was erased. The sting operation had cracked Joran's mask, but not enough to bring justice. He had admitted to disposing of Natalee's body. He had described it in detail. And then, just as easily, he had denied it. The world had seen him for what he was. But the law still saw shadows, not proof. Joran van der Sloot had slipped through the trap, but fate wasn't done with him yet. Because just 2 years later, his hunger for lies, money, and manipulation would lead him straight into another crime, one that would finally prove how dangerous he truly was. For 5 years, Joran van der Sloot had danced on the edge of suspicion. He had lied, manipulated, confessed, and retracted. He had smirked his way through interrogations and television cameras. And he had gotten away with it. But in 2010, on the 5th anniversary of Natalee Holloway's disappearance, Joran's dark hunger could no longer hide in lies. This time, the world would see him for what he truly was, a killer. Joran fled Aruba and wandered South America, gambling, hustling, and drifting from one scheme to another. By May 2010, he had settled briefly in Lima, Peru. It was a city alive with music, neon lights, and casinos, a playground for someone like Joran, who thrived on risk. In the casinos, he met Stephanie Flores, a 21-year-old Peruvian business student, bright, curious, and full of life. On May 30th, 2010, the exact anniversary of Natalee Holloway's disappearance, Joran invited Stephanie back to his hotel room. It would be the last night of her life. Inside room 309 of the Hotel TAC, Stephanie's fate was sealed. According to investigators, the two had been gambling together. Joran brought her to his room, where she found something she wasn't supposed to see, his laptop open with articles and emails about the Holloway case. Stephanie began asking questions, and that, investigators believe, is when Joran snapped. In a sudden violent rage, he attacked her. He beat her with his fists, struck her with objects in the room, and left her lifeless on the floor. She had no chance. Joran didn't panic. Instead, he calmly gathered his things, left Stephanie's body in the room, and walked out. Security cameras captured him leaving the hotel with chilling nonchalance, as though nothing had happened. It was a mask he had worn before, but this time the mask cracked. Stephanie's family reported her missing. Hours later, her body was discovered in Joran's hotel room. The evidence was undeniable. Blood on the sheets, signs of a violent struggle, his fingerprints everywhere. This time, Joran couldn't lie his way out. As news of the murder spread, an international manhunt began. Joran fled Peru, heading across the border into Chile. But his freedom was short-lived. Police caught him just days later, dragging him from a taxi. The smirk was gone. For the first time, Joran looked rattled. Peru paraded him before cameras. The once cocky suspect now reduced to a captured fugitive. The evidence was overwhelming, and the world knew it. Joran van der Sloot was no longer just a suspect in a disappearance. He was a killer caught red-handed. When Beth Holloway learned of Stephanie's murder, the grief was doubled. For years, she had warned the world that Joran was dangerous. For years, she had begged authorities to stop him. Now another young woman was dead, on the very anniversary of Natalee's disappearance. It was almost as if Joran had chosen the date to mock her, to send a twisted message. Beth's heartbreak turned to fury. If justice had been done in Aruba, she said, Stephanie would still be alive today. Unlike Aruba, Peru didn't hesitate. Joran was charged, tried, and found guilty of Stephanie's murder in 2012. He was sentenced to 28 years in prison. For many, it was bittersweet. Justice at last, but not for Natalee. Beth Holloway could only watch from afar, knowing that the man who would likely kill her daughter was finally behind bars. But for another woman's death, the murder of Stephanie Flores stripped away Joran's facade forever. No more lies. No more smirks on talk shows. No more doubt about what he was capable of. But while Peru delivered justice for Stephanie, Natalee Holloway's story still remained in limbo. And for Beth, that meant the fight wasn't over. Because killers don't just confess once. And in time, even Joran van der Sloot would open his mouth again. For years, Joran van der Sloot had moved like a ghost, slipping through interrogations, dodging consequences, and smirking at the world. But ghosts don't thrive in cages. And in January 2012, when a Peruvian judge sentenced him to 28 years in prison for the murder of Stephanie Flores, the mask finally cracked. Peru's prison system is nothing like Aruba's quiet beaches or European-style interrogation rooms. The cells were overcrowded, the food scarce, and the walls stained with violence. Fights broke out over scraps. Guards were as feared as the inmates. Joran, once arrogant and untouchable, became just another prisoner. He played cards for cigarettes. He watched his back constantly. He learned quickly that charm meant nothing behind concrete walls. But even in prison, he couldn't silence his need for attention. He granted interviews, complained about conditions, and insisted he was misunderstood. To the outside world, it was the same old Joran. Still smirking, still lying, still spinning. For Beth Holloway, Joran's imprisonment was bittersweet. Yes, he was finally caged. Yes, Stephanie's family had justice. But for Natalee, the silence remained. Beth visited Aruba again, meeting with officials, retracing her daughter's last steps, begging for new searches. Each time, she left empty-handed. The FBI followed leads, but none produced answers. Divers scoured the waters off Aruba, searching for bones, but the sea gave up no secrets. It was as though Natalee had been swallowed whole by the island, leaving Beth to fight shadows. For nearly a decade, the case grew quiet. Joran remained locked away in Peru, serving his sentence. His name appeared occasionally in headlines, complaints about his treatment, rumors of prison violence, even reports of marriage to a Peruvian woman while behind bars. But for the Holloways, none of that mattered. What mattered was the silence, the not knowing. Beth often said the worst pain wasn't death. It was the absence of truth, the inability to mourn, the never-ending question mark that haunted every holiday, every birthday, every quiet night alone. Even as the years stretched on, Beth refused to give up. She founded the Natalee Holloway Resource Center, helping families of missing persons. She wrote books, gave speeches, and turned her grief into advocacy. Every action carried the same message: Natalee matters, and she will not be forgotten. Her persistence kept the case alive in public memory, even as the world's attention shifted to other tragedies. Because for Beth, there was no moving on. There was only the fight. In prison, Joran played his usual tricks. At one point, he told reporters he would reveal the truth about Natalee's fate for money. He demanded tens of thousands of dollars, promising her family answers. When investigators looked closer, they found it was another scam, another cruel attempt to profit from pain. It was a reminder of who he truly was, not just a liar, but a predator feeding off suffering. And still Beth waited, hoping one day prison walls would strip him bare, hoping one day his arrogance would slip and he would finally tell the truth. The years after Stephanie's murder were marked by silence, but silence doesn't mean peace. Behind prison walls, Joran van der Sloot schemed, lied, and played games. Outside, Beth Holloway carried her grief like armor, refusing to surrender. The world thought the story was over, that Natalee's fate will remain a mystery forever. But in time, the silence would break. And when it did, the truth would shake everything. For nearly 2 decades, Joran van der Sloot played the world like a fiddle. He lied, manipulated, and deceived. He dangled false confessions, spun stories, and exploited the grief of a family already broken. But in October 2023, everything changed. Facing federal charges in the United States for extorting the Holloway family, Joran did what no one thought he would ever do. He confessed. Joran was temporarily extradited from Peru to the U.S. to face charges of extortion and wire fraud. Years earlier, he had demanded $250,000 from Beth Holloway, promising to reveal the location of Natalee's body. He delivered nothing but lies. Now, in an Alabama courtroom, justice finally had leverage. If he wanted a deal, if he wanted a lighter sentence, he had to speak. For the first time, Joran van der Sloot had no cards left to play. Beth Holloway sat quietly in the courtroom, her face a mask of strength. 18 years had passed since Natalee vanished. 18 years of waiting, of wondering, of hoping. As Joran prepared to speak, Beth leaned forward. This was the moment. The truth was finally within reach. Under oath, Joran admitted what he had denied for so long. He told the court he had taken Natalee to the beach in Aruba. They kissed. They talked. But when she rejected his advances, he snapped. He admitted he struck her hard. He claimed the blow rendered her unconscious, possibly even killing her instantly. Panic consumed him. He looked around. The waves crashed against the shore. And in that blind, desperate moment, Joran dragged Natalee's body into the sea. With the tide high and the night dark, the ocean swallowed her. And just like that, she was gone. As the words left his mouth, the room fell into silence. 18 years of lies, cover-ups, and manipulation, all distilled into one cold, matter-of-fact admission. Beth Holloway closed her eyes. This was a moment she had both feared and prayed for. The truth, brutal and final. Her daughter was never coming home. There would be no grave to visit, no remains to bury. Natalee was lost forever to the ocean. But now at least Beth knew. When Beth finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of nearly 2 decades of grief. "He is evil personified," she said of Joran van der Sloot. Her words cut like glass, filled not with rage but with bone-deep certainty. This was not just a man who had killed. This was a man who had lied, manipulated, and reveled in cruelty for years. Now, stripped of power, his confession laid bare the monster he truly was. For the extortion, Joran was sentenced to 20 years in U.S. federal prison, to be served alongside his existing Peruvian sentence. It was a hollow victory. No punishment could undo what he had done. No sentence could bring Natalee home. But for Beth, for the Holloway family, and for millions who followed the case, there was finally closure. The mystery was no longer a mystery. The truth was horrifying, but it was the truth. News of Joran's confession spread like wildfire. Headlines around the globe carried the same story. Joran van der Sloot confesses to killing Natalee Holloway. TV pundits debated whether he had told the full truth. Some wondered if his story was just another manipulation. But most agreed this was the closest anyone would ever come to knowing what happened on that fateful night in Aruba. The ocean had claimed Natalee, and Joran's words confirmed it. For Beth Holloway, the confession was both an ending and a beginning. The search was over, but the fight for justice, for awareness, for protection of others, that would never end. As she walked out of the courtroom that day, Beth carried the weight of the truth with her. The silence had finally broken, but the echoes of that night in 2005 would never fade. 18 years after Natalee Holloway vanished into the warm night air of Aruba, the truth finally surfaced. Her life had been stolen in a moment of rage. Her body claimed by the sea, her story stretched across decades of lies. But Natalee's story didn't end with her disappearance. Her legacy, shaped by her mother's relentless fight, continues to ripple far beyond the island where she was last seen. Natalee was just 18 years old, full of promise, laughter, and dreams. She never got to attend college, never got to travel the world, never got to live the life ahead of her. But through Beth's determination, Natalee became more than a victim. She became a symbol. Her case inspired documentaries, news coverage, and global conversations about missing persons. Her story lit a fire under lawmakers, law enforcement, and communities to do better, to act faster, to protect the vulnerable. Beth Holloway refused to be silent. In the face of unimaginable grief, she turned pain into purpose. She founded the Natalee Holloway Resource Center, helping other families navigate the nightmare of having a missing loved one. She wrote books, delivered speeches, and continued to hold Joran accountable in every way she could. For Beth, the fight was never just about Natalee. It was about every missing child, every grieving parent, every unanswered question. Her strength gave others strength. The lessons we're left with. The Natalee Holloway case is more than a true crime mystery. It is a lesson in vigilance, a reminder that beneath the beauty of paradise can lurk danger. That charm can mask cruelty. That justice can take decades and sometimes never fully arrive. It is also a lesson in resilience. That even when truth is buried, when hope feels impossible, when years stretch into decades, love does not quit. Beth Holloway proved that a mother's love can move mountains, can change laws, can force the world to pay attention. Joran Sloot will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars, shifting between Peruvian and U.S. prisons. But his name has become synonymous with lies, cruelty, and wasted potential. He could have been anyone: a student, an athlete, a young man with opportunity. Instead, he chose violence. He chose manipulation. He chose to prey on others, and in doing so, destroyed countless lives, including his own. His shadow lingers, not just as a reminder of evil, but as a warning. The Flores family in Peru who lost Stephanie. The Holloway family in Alabama who lost Natalee. Two young women taken too soon. Two mothers forced to bury their daughters in grief. One with a grave, the other with only the ocean. Their stories intertwine across continents, tied together by one man's violence and the world's hunger for justice. And in both stories, we see the same truth. Grief never ends, but neither does love. As the years pass, Natalee's face still appears on TV specials, still reminds the world of what was stolen. But beyond the headlines, beyond the courtroom confessions and the documentaries, there remains something deeply human: a mother's love, a daughter's memory, and a story that refuses to fade. For Beth Holloway, the fight will never truly end. But for the world, Natalee's story stands as both tragedy and warning, as both heartbreak and inspiration. Because in the end, Natalee Holloway is not just a girl who went missing in Aruba. She is the girl who taught the world how powerful love can be. Natalee's story began on a beach in Aruba, but it will echo forever through the waves, through the voices of those who remember, and through the love of a mother who never stopped searching. And that is the legacy of Natalee Holloway.